The beep of the keycard echoed down the hotel hallway. Through the crack of the door, my husband's coat hem and a strange woman's hand disappeared at the same time. Christmas carols were playing, but my heart froze with cold betrayal and shock. From the red scarf I'd dropped on the floor, a scent of unfamiliar perfume rose up and stung my nose, and in that moment, I felt myself collapse all over again. I had endured, I had been so lonely, and there in that hallway. I quietly made up my mind. I would never be fooled again. And I would protect my old age and my name before anything else. Why all of this happened I'll tell you from the beginning now. The sound of rain tapping against the windows filled the morning air. In Tacoma, Washington, under gray skies, gentle winter rain was soaking the garage roof. I buttoned up my camel coat, wrapped a red knit scarf around my neck, and walked toward our old sedan. Just as I was about to open the car door, I heard Robert's voice behind me. "Helen, I'll drive today. You know how hard it is to see when it gets dark in the evening." As he spoke, Robert gently took the car keys from my hand. Without a word, I opened the passenger door and sat down. As we drove up the freeway toward Seattle, Christmas carols played on the radio. Through the window, I could see Mount Rainier blanketed in snow in the distance. When we stepped into the lobby of the Crown Harbor Hotel on the Seattle waterfront, a massive tree stretching toward the ceiling spread before my eyes. Piano music drifted softly through the air, and the warm scent of cinnamon tickled my nose. For a moment, my heart fluttered unexpectedly. I couldn't remember the last time I'd felt such excitement. My high school classmates were gathered in one corner of the lobby. And when they saw me, they waved. "Helen, you haven't changed a bit. You really look the same." One friend lifted her camera and smiled. Robert lightly patted my shoulder and said, "I'll just watch the game at the bar on the first floor. Take your time and catch up." He waved and disappeared. Some time passed. I got lost trying to find the restroom, and accidentally took the elevator up to the guest room floors. When the doors opened, a quiet hallway appeared. The 15th floor. Only the soft sound of my footsteps on the carpet could be heard. I was about to turn back toward the elevator. That's when it happened. At the far end of the hallway, I spotted a familiar gray coat from behind. The gait, the shoulder line, the angle of the hat, all too familiar. It was Robert. My heart sank. Next to him stood a woman with short hair. Her voice drifted faintly down the corridor as she whispered, "Bob, hurry. Someone might see us." The two stopped in front of room 1508. Robert pulled a key card from his pocket and swiped it. A beep sounded and the green light came on. The woman linked her arm through Robert's and said, "Tonight? Just think about me." Her voice echoed to the end of the hallway. The two disappeared into the room, and the door slowly closed. In that moment, the small clutch bag fell from my hand. It hit the floor with a thud, and the red scarf inside spilled onto the carpet. I stood there frozen. I even forgot to breathe. I could see the red indicator light on the CCTV camera, mounted on the hallway ceiling, slowly rotating. That light seemed to be asking me something. My knees trembled. My hands shook so much I couldn't even pick up the clutch bag properly. I crouched down and gathered the scarf while my mind went blank. Was that really Robert the first just saw? No, it was definitely Robert. That gray coat was the one I bought him for his birthday last year. On the way back to the elevator, I had no strength in my legs. I came down to the lobby and sat in a chair. But I couldn't hear what my friends were saying. Only the number 1508 kept spinning in my head. Someone grabbed my arm and said, "Helen, are you okay? Your face is so pale." I forced a smile and answered, "I'm fine. Just a little dizzy." When I met Robert again in the hotel lobby that evening, he was smiling with a slight scent of beer. It was fun. I talked a lot with the guys about old times. Looking at his face, I couldn't say anything. On the drive home, silence filled the car. Through the window, a neon sign reading "Welcome to Tacoma" flashed by. But I couldn't even see those lights properly. That night, even lying in bed, I couldn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling and kept thinking, what did I do wrong? What more should I have done? The rain kept tapping against the window, and in that sound, I repeated the number 1508. I didn't know then that those numbers would change my life. The car driving down the freeway was quiet. On the night road from Seattle to Tacoma, news played on the radio. but nothing registered in my ears. Robert, gripping the steering wheel, spoke first. You had fun today, didn't you? Your friends only talked about you. I was proud to be your husband. Instead of answering, I looked out the window. Through the rain-soaked road, a neon sign reading Merry Christmas Tacoma flashed by. Watching the lights blur, I felt something inside my chest crumbling. Even when I didn't respond, Robert kept talking. What do you want to eat tomorrow? Your cooking is always the best. Hearing those words, I clenched my fists. The next morning came. I stopped by the nearby Safeway to shop. When I picked up milk, my hands kept slipping. I took a deep breath and pushed the cart toward the checkout. The cashier smiled and greeted me, but I couldn't meet her eyes properly. I just nodded slightly and left. I came home and stood in the kitchen. I set scrambled eggs, bacon, and toast on the table. Robert was reading the newspaper when he sniffed the air and smiled. Your breakfasts are still the best. I bragged to my friends yesterday too. I said my wife Helen's cooking is the best. Hearing that, I put the frying pan in the sink. Where were you last night? I asked carefully. Robert put down his coffee cup and turned his gaze to the window. Oh, I had a beer at the bar with some of the guys. Why? At that answer, my heart sank. But I couldn't ask more and just trailed off saying, just wondering. I stood at the sink and turned on the water. The sound of water filled my ears. When evening came, a football game was on the living room TV. Robert leaned back in the recliner chair, snoring. I sat on one side of the sofa pretending to knit. But I couldn't move the needles properly. In my head, only the hotel hallway and the number 1508 kept coming back. The woman's short hair, Robert linking arms with her. The beep of the door closing, everything was vivid. Days passed. One evening, a message notification popped up on Robert's phone. The screen lit up briefly, and I saw a name. Margaret with a flower emoji. My heart stopped for a moment. The plate in my hands almost fell. Robert quickly grabbed his phone and went into the bathroom. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling. The perfume smell from the hotel hallway came back to me. The red scarf fallen on the floor. The red light from the CCTV camera, everything came rushing back. Next to me, Robert was breathing quietly. I opened and closed my eyes repeatedly throughout the night. The next morning, while making coffee, I thought, should I pretend not to know? Or should I ask? My hands trembled again. I was holding the coffee pot when Robert came into the kitchen and said, nice weather today. Shall we take a walk? I nodded. Okay. Even as I said that, my heart was crumbling inside. We walked through the neighborhood. The winter wind hit my cheeks coldly. Robert tried to hold my hand, but I put my hands in my pockets. I saw Robert's expression stiffen for a moment. But he quickly smiled and changed the subject. Should we take a trip next year? Instead of answering, I just nodded. On the way home, I stood at the mailbox and pulled out the newspaper. I heard the sound of the newspaper rustling in the wind. Hearing that sound, I made up my mind. I couldn't just keep staying silent. I had to do something. But I didn't know where to start. I just held the newspaper to my chest and slowly walked inside. From that night on, I couldn't sleep. Listening to Robert's breathing, I repeated the number 1508. Margaret's name kept coming to mind too. Moonlight faintly streamed through the window. In that light, I looked back on my life. 45 years with my husband, the years I trusted and followed him. Was this the end? I felt like crying, but I held it back. I felt it wasn't time to cry yet. It was an overcast morning as the new year approached. I drove downtown to Tacoma. I parked in front of the Bank of America branch and sat there for a while. The number ticket in my hand was damp with sweat. I took a deep breath and opened the door. I stood at the teller window. Could you print out our joint account statement? My voice trembled, but I spoke as calmly as possible. The employee nodded and typed on the computer. The printer made a buzzing sound as paper came out. Hearing that sound, my heart raced. I took the printed account statement. My hands shook, making the paper rustle. As I scanned down, I saw familiar names. Crown Harbor Hotel Seattle, Bellevue Blossom Florist, Waterfront Steakhouse. They repeated on certain dates for months. I couldn't breathe. Sitting in the car, I opened the statement again. I traced the dates with my finger to confirm. The hotel payment dates matched exactly with the dates I'd gone to the reunion. It wasn't just that day. The previous month too, and the month before that the same pattern existed. Tears welled up, but I held them back. It wasn't time to cry yet. I came home. I could hear Robert showering in the bathroom. I quietly entered the bedroom and searched through his jacket. My hands trembled, but I couldn't stop. From the inside pocket, I found a small envelope. It was a keycard envelope with the hotel logo. Inside the envelope was a note. Room 1508 was written on it. And there was a small card with it. Bob, let's meet here every Christmas. The letter M was written at the end. It was handwritten. I took a picture of the card with my phone camera. My hands were shaking, but the shutter sound was quiet. I put everything back in its place. I heard the bathroom door opening. I hurried to the kitchen and started washing dishes. The sound of water filled my ears. Robert came into the living room and said, "What should we have for dinner?" Instead of answering, I washed the dishes. It was during dinner. I casually brought it up. That hotel had such a nice view. It would be nice if we could go there together sometime. Robert's hand stopped. Holding his fork, he froze for a moment, then his expression hardened. "Nah, let's not waste money on places like that. They're just expensive." He put down his fork. Seeing that reaction, I was certain. What I saw was real. It was no longer doubt but certainty. I cleared the table and steadied my mind. I couldn't put it off any longer. I had to do something. But I also knew I shouldn't respond emotionally. The following Monday came. While Robert was out playing golf with a neighborhood friend, I drove alone to Seattle. Driving on the freeway, my palms were sweaty. I turned off the radio. In the quiet car, I could only hear my heartbeat. I parked in the Crown Harbor Hotel parking lot. I sat there for a long time. I couldn't muster the courage to go in. But I couldn't just go back. I took a deep breath and got out of the car. The revolving door to the lobby slowly turned. I stood at the front desk. The employee smiled and greeted me. "How can I help you?" I carefully showed my ID and credit card statement and asked, "Can you confirm if my husband stayed here? I know the date and room number." The employee's expression stiffened slightly, but she checked the computer and nodded. She said privacy made details difficult. But when I stated the payment details and exact dates, she printed a receipt copy. On the paper, the text clearly read Room 1508, guests. Robert Carter, Margaret Lewis. Seeing those letters, my legs went weak. I sat in the cafe next to the lobby. I ordered coffee but couldn't take a sip. I just sat there holding the paper cup with both hands. Then my phone rang. It was a call from my high school friend Kathy. "Helen, remember that woman we saw in the lobby that day? The one next to Robert." Thinking about it, she looked so much like Margaret Lewis from our class. Kathy's voice came through the phone. I couldn't say anything, just listened. Kathy continued, "Margaret, after her husband died, runs a flower shop in Bellevue." I hung up and looked out the cafe window. I could see people busily passing by. In that moment, the name Bellevue Blossom Florist that Margaret runs came to mind. That was the exact name on the account statement. Feeling the coffee in my hands growing cold, I thought about what to do next. A few days later, I left the house saying I was going shopping in Bellevue. I followed the navigation to the end of a small strip mall. I saw the sign Bellevue Blossom Flowers. I parked and sat there for a long time. My breathing quickened. I looked through the shop window. A woman in her mid-60s with short hair was wearing an apron. She was wrapping flowers for a customer and smiling. It was the same woman I'd seen in the hotel hallway. Next to the register was a framed photo taken in the Crown Harbor Hotel lobby. Next to it was a small card that said, "Our Christmas Tradition." Just as I was about to open the door, I heard Margaret's voice from inside. "Bob, can you make it next week too?" Hearing that voice, I let go of the door handle. My heart was pounding. I returned to the car and gripped the steering wheel. It took a while to calm my breathing. On the way home, tears flowed. I tried to hold them back but couldn't stop. I stopped at a traffic light, put my forehead on the steering wheel, and cried. I don't know how long I cried. When a honk sounded from behind, I snapped back to reality. I wiped my tears and drove on. I knew it was really time to do something. As soon as I got home, I called my daughter Emily. My hands were shaking so much I could barely dial the number. Emily answered. "Mom, what's wrong?" Her voice was worried. I hesitated for a moment before saying, "Emily, I need to talk to you." Can you come over now? An hour later, Emily arrived. We sat facing each other at the kitchen table. I showed her the photos I'd saved on my phone one by one. Hotel receipts, notes, florist photos, account statements. Emily's expression grew more and more rigid as she looked at the photos. She was biting her lip hard. Mom, this isn't just an affair. Emily said quietly. If Dad is moving assets, you could lose the house. Hearing those words, chills ran through my body. Emily pulled out her laptop and started searching for something. Mom, we need to see a lawyer. Right now. The next day, Emily and I headed to the King County Legal Aid Center in downtown Seattle. Standing in front of the building, my legs trembled. Emily held my arm. We took the elevator to the 3rd floor. The bell dinged. Attorney Sarah Lee greeted us. She appeared to be in her late 30s. We entered her office and sat down. Sarah examined the documents I'd brought one by one. Only the sound of papers turning could be heard. Washington is a community property state, Sarah said, but who's actually named on the documents matters. You need to gather more evidence starting now. Hearing those words, my heart sank. Emily squeezed my hand tightly. Sarah pulled out a check. She said we needed to verify everything. The house title deed, pension accounts, savings account balances, recent transfer records. I nodded and took notes. My hands trembled, but I couldn't stop. This was about my life. For days, I searched every corner of the house. Study drawers, bedroom closets, garage shelves. I checked everything. While Robert was out, I searched for documents alone. My hands were damp with sweat. The papers rustled. I found the house title deed. The paper was yellowed with age. When I looked at the name section, I stopped breathing. It said only Robert Carter. My name was nowhere. A house we'd lived in together for 45 years, and my name wasn't on it. Tears welled up, but I held them back. I found the pension documents too. The 401k account statement. In the beneficiary section, it said, Robert Carter, and in small letters, emergency beneficiary Margaret Lewis. My name wasn't there either. My hands shook so much I could barely hold the paper. I copied all the documents and organized them in a file. Emily helped. Mom, you're doing great. Emily said, we'll get through this. Hearing that, I nodded. I knew there was no turning back. I also visited the Tacoma City Hall and County Recorder's office to check the property records for the house. The clerk typed on the computer and showed me the screen. It said owner Robert Carter. There was no co-owner. The house I'd lived in wasn't mine on paper. I called Sarah again. I told her I'd verified all the documents. Sarah said, well done. Now prepare for a family meeting. Rather than exploding emotionally, guide. The conversation centered on facts and documents. Hearing that advice, I nodded. Christmas Eve was approaching. I called the family and suggested we have Christmas Eve dinner at a family restaurant near the Tacoma waterfront. Robert thought it was a good idea and smiled. Daughter Emily, son Daniel all said they'd come. I circled the date on the calendar. It was Christmas Eve evening. We arrived at the restaurant. Through the window, the waterfront lights sparkled. Family members gathered one by one. Robert was still smiling. We ordered steak and salad. The food came, and conversation flowed. I pulled a thick document envelope from my shopping bag. My hands trembled, but I didn't stop. I quietly placed the envelope in the center of the table. Robert's expression froze. Emily and Daniel watched silently too. I opened the envelope. Hotel receipts, room receipt copies, florist photos, text message screenshots spread across the table. The rustling of papers echoed through the restaurant. Robert's face turned white. Emily held my hand. At that moment, the bell at the restaurant entrance rang. Ding-dong sounded, and a woman carrying a bouquet entered. It was Margaret, with her short hair. She saw Robert, smiled awkwardly, and approached. Merry Christmas, Bob. Her voice filled the restaurant. The air froze. The documents on the table glowed faintly under the candlelight. Margaret stood there holding the bouquet. Her gaze moved to the papers on the table. Hotel receipts, room numbers, text screenshots, each one caught her eye. Her face turned white. My son Daniel spoke first. Dad, what is all this? His voice trembled. Robert put down his water glass and bowed his head. I could see his hands shaking. Margaret sensed the situation and took a step back. I should go, she muttered. No, I said firmly. Sit down. I want to hear everything tonight. Margaret hesitated and sat in an empty chair. The sound of her setting the bouquet down on the table thudded softly. The candle flickered. Other diners in the restaurant glanced our way. Robert sat in silence for a long time. Only his rough breathing could be heard. Then he slowly opened his mouth. I was just Dad, just the breadwinner. No one ever asked if I was okay. His voice cracked. Emily turned her head. Robert brought up the robbery at the post office. It happened 20 years ago. A gunman had burst in, and a coworker was hurt. After that, he was plagued by nightmares. He couldn't sleep, but he never told anyone. As the breadwinner, he didn't want to appear weak. After retirement, it got harder, he said. No one needed him anymore. At home, he just watched TV and read newspapers while time passed. He felt his presence fading. He felt himself disappearing as a man. Margaret quietly spoke. I lost my husband to cancer too. Her voice trembled. Hospital bills and funeral costs left me with only debt. I managed the flower shop alone, but every day was lonely. When I met Bob again at the reunion, he seemed like my last hope. She wiped her tears. Listening to their stories, something inside me wavered. Compassion flickered. Everyone is lonely, everyone needs comfort. But my gaze returned to the property deed on the table. The draft transfer agreement caught my eye. In that moment, my wavering heart hardened again. I understand you were struggling, I said quietly but clearly. But why did you try to solve it by secretly transferring my house? My name, my retirement? Robert couldn't lift his head. Emily pushed away her father's hand and said, Dad, you can be lonely. But that doesn't give you the right to throw Mom out of her own home. Daniel also spoke up. Dad, I want to understand too. But this is too much. His voice also trembled. Robert finally bowed his head and muttered, I know, I went too far. I just wanted to make sure Margaret would be okay after I'm gone. Hearing those words, I took a deep breath. I remembered the hotel hallway last Christmas. The red scarf fallen on the floor. My hand picking it up, the moment I stood up slowly. Back then I'd collapsed, but now was different. This time it was my turn to lift up my life. My turn to protect my retirement, my dignity. Winter rain began to fall outside the restaurant. The sound of raindrops tapping against the window could be heard. I put the documents back in the envelope and said, we need to see a lawyer now. All of us. Robert nodded. Margaret quietly stood up, left the bouquet, and walked out. The sound of the door closing echoed softly. That night, silence filled the car on the way home. Robert gripped the steering wheel and stared ahead. I looked out at the raindrops. Only the sound of the wipers moving left and right could be heard. We arrived home and each went to our rooms. It was a long night. The next morning, I called attorney Sarah. I explained everything from last night. Sarah said, you did well. Now we need to prepare a specific agreement. Can you come soon? I said I would. The phone in my hand grew damp with sweat. I called Emily too. Sweetie, did I do the right thing? My voice trembled. Emily answered, Mom, you did really well. Now all that's left is to see it through. Hearing those words, tears welled up, but I held them back. It wasn't over yet. This was just the beginning. We went back to attorney Sarah's office. This time Robert came too. Emily accompanied us. While sitting in the waiting room, no one spoke. Only the tick-tock of the wall clock could be heard. Robert sat with his hands on his knees, staring at the floor. Sarah called us in. We entered the conference room and sat down. There was a large table, and downtown Seattle was visible through the window. Sarah pulled out several papers and spread them on the table. This is the current situation. Her finger pointed to the title deed. The house is currently solely in Robert Carter's name. Sarah explained. Same with the 401k account. The savings account is joint, but Robert actually manages it. As I listened, I clenched my fists. I could feel my nails digging into my palms. Washington is a community property state. So theoretically property acquired during the marriage is jointly owned. Sarah continued. But to divide property without divorce proceedings, you need mutual agreement. That means Robert has to voluntarily consent. She looked at Robert. Robert nodded. I agree. His voice was small. Emily looked at her father. Sarah opened her laptop and said, then let's outline the specific terms. First, change the Tacoma house to joint ownership. Second, transfer part of the savings account to Helen's individual account. Third is most important, Sarah emphasized. In the future, if Robert transfers assets to a third party or uses them as collateral, Helen's written consent must be required. Without this, the same thing could happen again. I nodded. Robert bit his lip. It took 2 hours to draft the agreement. Only the sound of Sarah typing echoed in the conference room. I looked out the window. Clouds were drifting slowly. Emily was searching for something on her phone. Robert just sat there. The draft was completed. Sarah took the paper from the printer and placed it in front of us. Read through each page. Ask if you don't understand anything. I took out my glasses and started reading slowly. The words entered my eyes. Joint ownership, account transfer, written consent required. After reading, I looked up. Will this protect my retirement? Sarah nodded. It's the most legally protective structure we can create. Of course it's not perfect, but it's the best we can do right now. I took a deep breath and said, okay. Let's do this. Robert also agreed. I understand. His voice was weak. Sarah smiled and said, then I'll prepare the formal agreement. Let's meet again in a week to sign. I nodded. 1 week, just one more week to endure. We left the office and took the elevator. No one spoke on the way down. The bell dinged as we reached the first floor. Cold wind blew when we stepped outside. Robert spoke first. Helen, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I looked at him. Sorry isn't enough. But I suppose that's all you can say right now. We need to each live our own way. Robert bowed his head. I know. I ruined everything. The wind blew through our hair. Emily grabbed my arm. Mom, let's get some coffee. We went into a nearby cafe. Warm air wrapped around our faces. Christmas carols played inside the cafe. It was ironic. It was the Christmas season, but my heart felt anything but warm. Emily and I talked over coffee. Robert left first, saying he'd go home. Emily held my hand and said, Mom, you're really doing great. Don't forgive Dad too easily. Your life is more important. Hearing those words, my eyes grew hot. On the drive home, I was alone in the car. Driving on the freeway, I turned on the radio. The news came on. A story about year-end financial planning. Content about retirement asset management, the importance of writing a will. I turned up the volume. I arrived home to find Robert sitting on the living room sofa. The TV was on, but he wasn't watching the screen. I went to the kitchen and drank a glass of water. I felt the cold water going down my throat. And I thought, things really need to change now. Night came and I went to the bedroom. Robert said he'd sleep in the guest room. I lay alone in bed staring at the ceiling. I remembered the hotel hallway last Christmas. The red scarf I'd dropped on the floor then. The moment I picked it up and stood. What I was doing now felt the same. Picking my life back up. A week passed. I went back to Attorney Sarah's office. This time it was the day to sign the formal agreement. Both Emily and Daniel were there. Robert came too. We all sat in the conference room. Sarah handed out copies of the agreement. This is the final version. Read through it one more time. I put on my glasses and read from beginning to end. All the clauses we'd agreed on were included. Tacoma House changed to joint ownership. Savings account transfer, written consent required for third-party transfers. There's a particularly important clause. Sarah pointed to one page. If Robert changes his will, or changes life insurance beneficiaries in the future, Helen must be notified. This was added. I nodded. Thank you. Robert held the pen and hesitated. I could see his hand trembling. Emily said quietly, Dad, this is the right thing to do. Robert took a deep breath and signed the signature line. The sound of the pen scratching across the paper echoed softly. It was my turn. My hand holding the pen trembled, but I firmly wrote my name. Helen Carter. The writing was a bit crooked, but it didn't matter. This was the signature that protected my life. Sarah smiled. Congratulations. Now you're legally protected. Sarah gave additional advice. Helen, write a new personal will too. Now is the time. I nodded. How'd I do that? Sarah opened her laptop and showed me a template. Use this for reference. You can write it without a lawyer's help. I came home and sat at the computer. I opened the will template. I started filling in the blanks. Asset distribution, beneficiary designation. Funeral wishes. I wrote down each one. Only the sound of my hands moving on the keyboard could be heard. This house goes to those who grew old with me and to the children who stood by me to the end. I wrote that sentence. I also wrote that the savings account would be divided equally between Emily and Daniel. Robert's name was included only conditionally, with the condition that he honors the agreement. I printed the will, signed it, and dated it. It needed to be notarized, but the draft was complete. I put the document in a file and stored it safely. Then I texted Emily, "Honey, I made a will. Keep a copy for yourself." A few days later, I got a call from Margaret. "Helen, can we meet and talk?" Her voice was cautious. I hesitated for a moment before answering, "Okay." We agreed to meet at a small cafe in Bellevue. When I arrived at the cafe, Margaret was already there. She sat by the window with coffee in front of her. I sat across from her. A moment of silence passed. Margaret spoke first. "I'm sorry, Helen. I'm so sorry." I looked at her. "I heard your apology. But that's not enough." Margaret bowed her head. "I know. There's no excuse." I took a sip of coffee and said, "I understand you were struggling. But that doesn't mean you had the right to take my life." Margaret wiped her tears. "You're right. I was too desperate. But that was my problem. I had no right to invade your life." I took an envelope from my bag. "This is all I can do." Inside the envelope was a small check. "Consider it part of your husband's funeral expenses." I said, "This is all. You'll have to figure out the rest yourself." Margaret took the envelope and bowed her head. "Thank you, Helen. You're a much stronger person than I am." Hearing that, I stood up. I left the cafe and walked to the parking lot. The winter wind blew cold. But my heart felt a little lighter. I'd drawn the line. I'd done what I could. I got in the car and started the engine. The next day, I went to the Tacoma County Recorder's office. It was the day to submit the ownership change paperwork. Robert came too. The clerk at the window reviewed the documents and stamped them. A thump sounded. "All set." The clerk smiled. Leaving the building, winter rain was falling outside. Walking to the parking lot, I held the envelope close. A gray city bus slowly passed on the wet road. Watching it, I thought, this is the beginning. The beginning of really living my life. Sitting in the car, I checked my phone. There was an email notification. It was from the Crown Harbor Hotel. It said it was regarding CCTV footage inquiry. I opened the email and started reading. Legally, the footage had already been deleted. But guest records and payment details were kept and could be provided as official documents if desired. My finger moved across the screen. I started writing a reply. "Thank you, but I don't need the footage. I already have everything I need." I pressed send. With a whoosh, the email was sent. Then I put down the phone. I looked out the window. Rain kept falling. I didn't need to turn on the wipers. I wanted to just sit here for a moment. Listening to the rain, I looked back on the past. The hotel hallway, the red scarf, and me now. I felt so different. A year had passed. Christmas season came around again. A high school reunion was being held at a small diner near Seattle. I drove alone. Driving on the freeway, I thought about this time last year. The hotel I'd gone to with Robert, the scene I saw in the hallway, all of it now seemed like a distant story. I arrived at the diner. I parked in the lot and looked in the rearview mirror. My face reflected back. I had a few more wrinkles than last year. But my expression looked much more peaceful. I reapplied lipstick and got out of the car. When I opened the diner door, friends waved. "Helen, over here." I walked to the table exchanging greetings. Some friends hugged me. When I sat down, Kathy said, "Helen, your face looks so much more relaxed. You look like someone who's made a decision." I smiled and took off my coat. Around my neck was the red knit scarf. I'd dropped in the hotel hallway that day last year. Friends said the scarf was pretty. I lightly touched the scarf and said, "Remember this scarf? I picked it up from the hallway floor last year. And that day I thought, I need to wrap my life around my neck again too." Friends quietly nodded. Some asked what had happened. I explained briefly. My husband had been with someone else, tried to transfer assets without my name. So I legally protected my share. Friends listened with solemn expressions. "You did the right thing, Helen." One friend said, "It couldn't have been easy to make that decision at our age." I nodded and answered, "It wasn't easy, but I had to do it. Protecting my retirement comes first." Another friend held my hand. It was warm. We talked about various things over the meal. Stories about grandchildren, health, travel plans. I shared my stories bit by bit too. How I volunteer at the library now, joined a knitting club. Even take cooking classes with Emily. Time passed and the gathering ended. I hugged friends and said goodbye. We promised to see each other again next year. Leaving the diner and walking to the parking lot. The winter air hit my cheeks coldly. But I felt good. I got in the car and started the engine. I got on Highway 16 heading to Tacoma. Winter rain began spattering outside the window. I turned on the wipers. The left-right movement sounded rhythmic. I turned on the radio. An advertisement played. Retirement isn't just planning, it's choosing yourself. That sentence echoed in my ears. I nodded. That's right. Choosing yourself. Looking at the darkness outside, I said to myself, you used to say you wanted to protect the family. I was always left out of that family. Now I'll protect it my way. Driving on the freeway, lights flashed by. Gas station neon signs, restaurant signs, Christmas tree lights in homes. I arrived in Tacoma. I parked in front of the house and got out. Opening the front door, warm air embraced me. The fireplace was lit. Robert was sitting on the living room sofa reading a book. He looked up when I came in. How was it? Robert asked carefully. It was good. I answered briefly and took off my coat. I hung the red scarf on the coat rack. I went to the kitchen and drank a glass of water. Robert turned his gaze back to his book. Things were still awkward between us, but now we were each living our own way. Mail was piled on the table. Going through it one by one, I found Christmas cards from Emily and Daniel. I opened the card and started reading. Mom, I love you. Thanks to you finding courage, we learned too. It was Emily's handwriting. Daniel's card had similar content. Mom, I'm always rooting for you. You showed us what real strength is. Reading the cards, my eyes grew hot. But this time it was from gratitude, not sadness. I sat in front of the fireplace. The flames crackled and burned. Listening to that sound, I thought. I was no longer just someone's wife. I was Helen Carter, 69 years old, the master of my own life. I remembered the hotel hallway last year. My husband's back in front of room 1508. The red scarf fallen on the floor, the red light from the CCTV camera. That day I'd collapsed. But that moment asked me a question. Would I live like this? The answer was clear. No. Just as I'd picked up the scarf from the floor and stood. I'd lifted my life back up too. Legal documents, agreements, ownership changes. Well, I did it all with my own hands. It wasn't easy, but I did it. And I smiled slowly. What I saw in the hotel hallway that day wasn't my husband's back. It was the face of my life making up its mind never to drop to the floor again. Like the red scarf, I'd wrapped my dignity around my neck again. And protected my retirement with my own hands. Snow began to fall outside the window. I could see white snowflakes slowly falling. The fireplace light reflected in the window and sparkled. Looking at that light, I thought, what would unfold next year? What choices would I make? One thing was certain. From now on, I decide my life. I won't wait for someone to choose for me. I'll speak with my voice, sign with my name, walk with my feet. Looking at the fireplace, I said quietly, thank you, me from that day, for standing up without falling apart. And I promise, I'll keep standing up. No matter how many times I fall, I'll get back up. That's my way. Night deepened. The fireplace fire was slowly going out. I stood up and climbed the stairs. I opened the bedroom window and breathed in the night air. Cold, clean air filled my lungs. I lay in bed and closed my eyes. I made it through today safely. I'll live well tomorrow too. With that thought, I fell asleep. Even in my dreams, the red scarf was blowing in the wind. But this time it didn't fall to the floor. It was wrapped firmly around my neck. Everyone, have you ever been deeply hurt by someone you truly trusted? Like I was? Through what happened to me, I learned that before love, I must first protect my own dignity and my later years. I realized it late, but it is not too late. And we still have the courage and hope to stand up again. If you have had a similar experience or have a story in your heart, please feel free to share it quietly in the comments so we can be a comfort to one another. If my story stayed with you today, I would be grateful if you could support me with a subscription and a like. And if someone comes to mind, I hope you might gently send this video to them as well. Thank you sincerely for listening to the end. And I wish you long-lasting health and peace.